Did you know that in a certain year, in a powerful city, one night created a secret that changed several lives? The city never truly slept. Glass towers stayed lit like watchful eyes, black cars whispered through empty streets, and power moved quietly behind tinted windows. That night, rain polished the asphalt until the city looked unreal, like a place designed for destiny rather than ordinary people. She arrived without a plan. A woman with tired eyes and careful posture, carrying the weight of a past she never spoke about. She wore simplicity like armor, unaware that anonymity would betray her. In a city obsessed with status, she blended in perfectly until she didn't. He noticed her not because she was loud, but because she wasn't. While others leaned forward to be seen, she leaned back, listening, observing, existing in her own silence. He was used to being the axis around which rooms rotated. Power clung to him even when he tried to shed it for a night. Wealth had erased most surprises from his life, but not her. Their conversation began by accident. A glance held too long. A pause that felt intentional. Words came slowly, as if both were careful not to disturb something fragile forming between them. They spoke of nothing important. Music, the rain, the strange loneliness of crowded places. Yet every sentence carried weight, the kind that settles in the chest without explanation. Outside, the storm grew heavier. The decision to leave together was never spoken aloud. It unfolded naturally, like a scene already written. The city blurred past the windows as silence filled the car, not awkward, but electric. In his penthouse, high above the sleeping streets, the world narrowed to two people standing too close, breathing the same air. What followed was not reckless passion, but something quieter and more dangerous. A night of slow movements and searching hands, a vulnerability neither expected. No promises, no names spoken fully, just the illusion that time had paused for them alone. At dawn, the illusion shattered. She woke first. Light crept through the curtains, touching his face, and fear settled gently into her chest. Not fear of him, but of what staying might mean. She dressed without waking him, each movement deliberate, silent. On the table, she left nothing behind. No note, no trace. When the door closed behind her, the city swallowed her whole. By the time he woke, the room felt emptier than it should have. The bed was cold on one side. The air held a memory he couldn't grasp. He stood by the window, watching the city wake up, unaware that something had already been taken from him. And far below, among strangers and morning traffic, she disappeared, carrying a secret that had not yet revealed itself. The city moved on, but destiny had already marked them both. The truth arrived quietly, the way storms sometimes do, without thunder, without warning. Weeks after the night that was never meant to matter, she stood alone in a narrow bathroom, morning light reflecting off cold tiles, staring at a result she did not want to misunderstand. The city outside her window was different now. Louder, sharper, less forgiving. She did not cry. She sat on the edge of the bathtub and breathed through the weight settling into her body, into her future. The memory of that night returned not as passion, but as a question she could no longer ask. She did not know his name, not really. Only fragments. A voice. A presence. A man who belonged to a world she had no access to. She chose silence. In a small apartment far from glass towers and guarded entrances, she began a life defined by restraint and courage. Pregnancy softened her face and hardened her resolve. Each day was practical. Each night was heavy. She worked until her body protested, saved money she barely earned, and built walls around a secret that grew beneath her heart. When the child was born, the room felt impossibly still. He arrived quietly like her. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a calm intensity that unsettled nurses who could not explain why such a small life felt so present. She held him and felt fear twist into something else, something fierce. Love, sudden and absolute. Years passed. She raised him alone, teaching him gentleness in a world that rewarded dominance. He asked questions she answered carefully. About fathers, about absence, about why some people were meant to stay and others were not. She never spoke the truth because she did not fully understand it herself. Across the city, in rooms guarded by loyalty and power, the man lived another life. His name filled headlines. His companies shaped markets. His face appeared on screens beside words like visionary and untouchable. Yet in moments of silence, something remained unresolved. A memory he could not retrieve fully. A woman whose face blurred no matter how hard he tried to recall it. He searched without knowing how. Private investigators followed shadows. Old security footage was reviewed, then dismissed. The night existed in fragments. Rain, silence, a feeling of almost recognition. No name, no trace. She had vanished too completely. The world watched him closely. Media speculated about heirs, alliances, marriages designed for influence. He gave them nothing. Something inside him resisted permanence, as if it belonged to a life he had lost without realizing it. Then, one ordinary afternoon, fate shifted. He was leaving a meeting when a small collision stopped him. A child, no older than 6, had run straight into him, eyes wide, breathless from speed and laughter. Time slowed in an unsettling way. The resemblance was immediate, not obvious to the world, but undeniable to him. The same eyes, the same stillness beneath movement. A reflection he had seen only in mirrors. The child looked up, unafraid, curious. Behind him, a woman froze. Her hand tightened around a grocery bag. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. She saw the moment recognition ignited in his expression, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that the past had found them. No words were spoken, but fear had already begun to spread. The city had a way of sensing when something important was about to break. He stood still far longer than necessary, staring at the child as if the world around them had faded into silence. The boy's face held no fear, only curiosity, the kind that came from being raised with honesty rather than secrets. His posture was familiar, too familiar. A subtle confidence, untrained, unlearned. The man felt it deep in his chest. Not certainty, instinct. He straightened slowly, the weight of his status returning like armor sliding back into place. Security moved closer, alert but restrained. Cameras somewhere in the distance clicked, unnoticed. In this city, even accidents could become headlines. She spoke first, her voice controlled but fragile at the edges. She apologized. Too quickly, too formally. The kind of apology meant to end a moment before it could grow dangerous. The child looked between them, sensing tension without understanding it. The man's gaze lifted from the boy to the woman, and stalled. Time did something cruel. Her face unlocked memories that had refused to surface for years. The rain, the silence, the way she listened more than she spoke. Recognition did not arrive cleanly. It crept in with doubt and disbelief. He said nothing. Power had taught him patience, but this was different. This was restraint laced with fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being right. She pulled the child closer, instinctively protective. She had spent years preparing for this moment without knowing when or how it would arrive. She had imagined anger, accusations, exposure. She had not imagined the quiet danger of his calm. He asked the child's name. A simple question. A loaded one. She answered for him, voice steady, heart racing. She did not offer explanations. She did not run. Running now would draw attention. Running would confirm everything. The man smiled at the child. Not the kind of smile meant for cameras or boardrooms, but something softer, unguarded. It unsettled her more than any threat could have. He suggested coffee. Not a command. Not a demand. A suggestion wrapped in courtesy. The kind of invitation that felt optional only on the surface. She hesitated. Media pressure hovered like a storm cloud. One wrong move could turn her son into a headline, a scandal, a pawn. She had protected him from the world's hunger for years. Sitting across from one of its most powerful men felt like stepping into fire. But the child tugged at her sleeve, curious, open, unafraid. She agreed. Inside the cafe, glass reflected their distorted images. The man listened more than he spoke. He watched the boy, how he held his cup, how he observed people quietly, how he mirrored gestures without realizing it. The resemblance grew louder with every second. He did not ask the question yet. She waited for it anyway. Truth moved slowly between them, unspoken but heavy. Every glance carried possibility. Every silence carried threat. Outside, the city kept breathing. Inside, a secret that had survived years of solitude began to crack. The cafe grew quieter, as if the walls themselves were listening. He leaned back slightly, hands folded, posture controlled, but his eyes never left the child. Years of commanding rooms had taught him how to hide emotion, yet something in his gaze betrayed him now. Calculation wrestled with something older, something human. He asked questions that were harmless on the surface. School, favorite food, dreams. The child answered freely, unaware of the significance of every word. With each answer, the man felt the space between assumption and certainty collapse further. She watched carefully. Every muscle in her body was prepared to intervene, to end the conversation, to disappear again if needed. But escape no longer felt possible. Power had found her, and power rarely let go. When he finally looked at her, truly looked, the air changed. He spoke her name. Hearing it from his mouth felt like a fault line breaking open. She did not ask how he knew it. She understood instantly that he had been searching, not for answers, but for her. Not knowing her face had haunted him. Not knowing her story had unsettled him. The city had offered him everything except this moment. He did not accuse. He did not demand. He said he had spent years feeling that something had been taken from him without knowing what it was. He said he recognized the child not as proof, but as truth. Her fear surfaced at last. She spoke of nights alone, of choices made without safety nets, of protecting a child from a world that devoured innocence. She spoke carefully, not begging, not apologizing. She reminded him that power could destroy as easily as it could provide. Silence followed. Outside, a car passed. A flash of cameras reflected briefly in the glass. The world was close. Too close. He understood the danger instantly. Media pressure would not wait. Investors would speculate. Enemies would circle. The child would never be invisible again. Slowly, deliberately, he made a choice. He said he would not claim what was not offered. He said he would not expose a truth that could break them both. He said he would wait, if waiting was the price of trust. For the first time since that night years ago, she believed him. The child reached for his hand without hesitation. The man froze, then allowed it. In that small gesture, something irreversible began. Not a resolution. Not yet. But a beginning shaped by fear, hope, and restraint. The city did not notice. But destiny did. The city would never know how close it came to destroying them. News cycles moved fast. Empires shifted daily. Power devoured novelty and moved on. And because he chose silence over spectacle, the truth did not explode the way it was designed to. There were no headlines. No leaked documents. No carefully staged appearances with a child at his side. There was only time. He arranged protection that could not be traced back to him. Schools selected not for prestige, but for distance. Security that looked like coincidence. Safety disguised as normal life. He did not appear suddenly as a savior, because he understood something too well. Love imposed by power was not love at all. She watched from a careful distance as he proved himself in the only way that mattered, by respecting the life she had built without him. They met quietly, sometimes in places that meant nothing to the world. Parks without names, cafes without mirrors, streets where nobody looked twice. The child grew used to his presence without understanding its meaning. To him, the man was calm, patient, attentive. A figure who listened more than he spoke. A figure who never lied. The resemblance became impossible to ignore. Years had shaped the man into something sharper, but being near the child softened him in ways no boardroom ever had. He learned restraint anew. He learned fear, the kind that came from having something to lose. The woman watched all of this with guarded hope. When the truth was finally spoken aloud to the child, it was not dramatic. It was quiet, honest, painful and gentle at the same time. The boy did not cry. He simply nodded, processing a reality that felt inevitable rather than shocking. And then he asked a single question. "Are you staying?" The man answered without hesitation. Yes. Not as a declaration of ownership, not as a promise backed by wealth, but as a choice. Media pressure never disappeared. It lingered at the edges, a constant threat, but they learned how to live in the spaces it could not reach. Sacrifice became routine. Privacy became precious. Love became something deliberate, slow, and fiercely protected. The woman did not surrender her independence. The man did not surrender his power. They learned to exist between those truths. At night, when the city lights shimmered like distant stars, the three of them would sit in silence. No cameras, no expectations, no names that mattered. Just shared space, shared breath, shared time. That was the ending the city never owned. Not a fairy tale, Not a conquest, but a life chosen quietly, against the noise of the world. And somewhere in the silence, the secret that began with one night finally found its peace.